I'll be speaking with Maria, an American who is living in Baltimore but now is in Hebron, Al Khalil, in Palestine, and she's been there in a very dramatic time. Good evening, I guess, at your time. Good evening.
Good evening. Masal khair, Stanley.
So this morning we got word from Code Pink that some soldiers had tear gassed a girls' school. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, actually, that's called Fiha Girls School. This tear gassing it's pretty standard. So Fiha Girls School is right near the K-Tune checkpoint, where it's pretty much the daily theater of clashes between boys who are generally about 6 or 7 years old, not really older than 14. So every day, generally, the soldiers there tear gas them upwards of 10 rounds of tear gas and regularly skunk them. And today they did so many that the gas wafted over to the girls' school. Now, this is a girls' primary school, let's be clear, like under 13 years old. And I guess like there were several ambulances deployed to the school, like lots of girls. There's pictures of little girls unconscious, like waiting to be like administered for inhalation of tear gas. And like they shut the school 2 hours or 3 hours after school started. Um, this is
Some
like
question. No, where is this? There's the various areas in Hebron, and we don't know all the vocabulary. So where is the clashes, as you say, taking place in the girls' school?
Yeah, this is really close to, I guess many people will know the Ibrahimi Mosque. Maybe Jewish people will know it as the Cave of the Patriarch, as it's
Hmm.
now been split into since the massacre.
Yeah, the massacre
19.
of 10, 15 years ago, right.
Mhm.
Um, so you say these fights go on a lot in Hebron, these struggles,
Yes, but
and
I want to be clear, like we can really hardly call it fights when it's between like several armed police officers that have M16s and like a bunch of really like boys who are learning to read who like recently stopped peeing in the potty or started peeing in the potty, excuse me. Like they have rocks, they're throwing rocks. And these soldiers, they have big guns and they're not hesitating to shoot them at any time. So when we say it's a fight, I mean, maybe not.
I understand. I also understand you saw two Palestinians being killed.
Yes. So, right outside of our house in Tel Rameda, a few weeks ago, unfortunately, we saw Humam and Islam both be gunned down by Israeli soldiers. In the first case, Humam, one of my roommates, immediately after we heard the gunshots and like immediately went to the ground, she got up and looked for the knife because there's a lot of people who are saying all these kids like who are being shot, it's because they're like trying to stab people. And a lot of other situations are happening where actually there's no knife ever recovered or like all photos show there isn't. So she was checking and she said there was no knife. And in the second situation, another roommate the next day was sitting on the windowsill watching and he said that this boy was had his hands in the air and he wasn't holding anything and um, these two soldiers just like crept around the corner and shot him down. Now, mind you, this is after he came through a checkpoint where he either went through a metal detector or he went through a metal detector and was searched and was declared clean, and then he came through to where we are, past several dozen soldiers. Also, witnesses in the area um, heard. It's not funny. It's so they heard a soldier like point him out and say, "That's a nice one. Why don't you shoot that one?" And this isn't the first time. A lot of other like witnesses around points where a lot of people have killed have heard police or army personnel mentioning that they're in the mood to kill a Palestinian today or other like really similar insanely aggressive and like blatant phrasing. So like
How
it seems
old
like
were
a manhunt.
these? How old were these youths?
I think Islam was like 19 and the other one was 23. They were both in their really early adulthood.
And you say it happened a couple of weeks ago.
If you
And the first case you personally witnessed, then you got into the whole question of the knife. But what did you actually see?
So when the gunshots went off, all of us were right in the living room, so maybe like 20 feet from the actual side of the where the boy was shot. So we all jumped to the floor, and then very quickly all of us got up and we saw a boy on the ground bleeding to death. But my one roommate got up before all of us, and she said that there was no knife, and she looked. So I didn't personally watch him like walking and then not walking, but I saw him seconds after, like less, for sure, less than a minute, maybe less than 30 seconds after. And in the other case, the this boy was in the second case, the boy was crossing around a corner, and the window to the bedroom where the women in his house stay has been sort of like stuck shut with metal shutters for a really long time. So we were all peering out, and actually the lens on my camera phone could fit like maybe, it's like a quarter of an inch slot, like these old-fashioned shutters. So we're watching through there, and we're watching ambulances come and medics watch and not do anything with him, and like people are looking, settlers are looking, Israeli settlers, like not even police or medical personnel of any kind are looking, taking pictures. And so we like did our best to film what was going on, just with the limited vantage that we had, because they, instead of doing it in the same staging, they did it around the corner where there was like fewer windows, I think, where people couldn't see. Because like all of the police saw us seeing them. They saw us watching the ambulance come and no one treat this kid. Like they saw us watching the settlers come and like taking selfies in front of like what was either a dying boy or a body. Like they came afterward and danced. They played music maybe an hour later, like with a loud car stereo, and they were handing out like treats and punch. Like this is, obviously, I'm American, I'm white.
The body was still there, and they were having these treats and punch?
Maybe, yeah, I don't remember. Maybe it was in the bag, maybe it was in the ambulance. But they haven't given back either of these kids either. They're both still, because they're accused of being terrorists, so they're both still in the Israeli morgue. And sometimes they take years to give these kids back. And if you're a Muslim, then your grieving process has to do something important that they do is that they bury within 24 hours. And ironically, if you're Jewish, this is extremely important as well. So it's Jewish people sort of profaning the dead. And also, there's a lot about how, like they're saying these boys are bodies, and they're not going to, they totally are threatening to demolish the houses. And there also has never been a trial. Like, these boys were just shot on the street, and, like, who knows if they believe they saw something or if they just planted something or what, but plain and simple, there was no trial, and like these are young people, and it's happening. There's been like 80 killed in the West Bank so far, like this month, or only in October. Anyway, so yeah, I'm sorry, I have a lot. It just happened.
Yeah, you must be exhausted. You've been here since when?
September 26th.
So you're there the entire uprising, or whatever you want to call this thing. You've been there. Incredible.
Well, a lot of people are calling it that, but I really feel like it's not for me as like an American and a white person to say whether it's an intifada or not. I mean, that's language that each Palestinian has to determine for like themselves, and it's not for me to get into whether it's intifada or what. But I fully support the Palestinian right to freedom and the right to resistance. So.
And I understand where you were living, you were forcibly ejected by the Israeli military. Could you talk about that?
Yes, so in the neighborhood of Tel Rameda, for a few weeks now, there's been they're calling it a closed military zone. So it's giving them the ability to like restrict the access of anyone who's not a resident. And how they determine a resident is if you came on one of the first days and registered yourself. So maybe for like the Jewish Zionists, like maybe this can harken back to another like recent episode of like ethnic cleansing and fascism, where people were forced to register, and then like their movement was exceptionally restricted and tracked, and then several of them were killed. But anyway, so they registered all these people, and then you couldn't come in or out unless you were registered, and then you couldn't come in or out if you were registered, and you couldn't leave your house, and you were going to be searched at gunpoint, and you would just be sent home. So that's been what's going on in Tel Rameda, and one of the measures is that they said that it's a closed military zone, and though we are residents, they said that we couldn't be residents because we're not Palestinian. For whatever reason, they can say anything they want. So, like, they evicted us one time while I was arrested. Myself and a colleague were arrested for for asking to see an order for a closed military zone, and then being told to stay because a soldier was like, okay, now we're going to call the police, you need to stay. So we were like, okay, we'll stay. And then they called the police and arrested us. But anyway, while we were while we were being held, when we got out, we found out that all of our roommates had been evicted, and
Mm.
and they're also, I mean, like, yeah. And so then we've been fighting to try to get the house back, and then we were able to get in with having sort of brought forth all these contracts showing that we're really residents. Um, Three of us were able to get in, and then soldiers and police came to forcibly eject us, and actually, like, they forcibly ejected us. Like, they were beating down the doors, and actually in the roof, they actually like broke out a huge piece of the wall, like big enough for two people to put their heads through at one time. And there's just like cement and like stone all over the floor here, and there's no way to. It's like, anyway. They came in and they were like, we need you to get out. And we were like, let us see a warrant, like let us see something, some piece of paper that shows this is legal. And they just wouldn't, and they wouldn't, and they wouldn't. And so we were like, you need to show us. And then they started beating up my friend, like the one, just one of the people who was with us. They were like twisting his arm in a way that is characteristic. Like if you get arrested and interrogated by the Shabak, like often they'll break your arm by twisting it behind your back in this way. And they were doing it to him, and they were pushing him. So the others of us started just screaming that he's not resisting and that we didn't want him to resist. And then they took us out of the house. And they didn't even arrest us. They just threw us out. And so, yeah, a little bit. We were a little bit forcibly ejected. But, you know, it's nothing compared to what's happening. Like, all the Palestinians' houses around here, it's like maybe 40 in the last couple of days have been, like, violently raided, where people are being beat up, their things are being totally destroyed, and no one's being arrested, and there's not for any reason. Like, they're not even ejecting them. They're just doing it to enforce fear. And, like, I have recourse. You know, I can call my embassy, I can sue them, but if I'm Palestinian, like, I have nothing, and they're so much more violent toward me. So, I mean, it was really scary. It was probably the
That's the
scariest thing that ever happened to me, but also, like, Palestinians go through that all the time in Hebron.
last thing. You saw some homes being demolished. Is that right?
No, actually, so it's yes, I as part of my solidarity with Palestinians, I went to homes that had demolition orders. Um,
Hmm.
Thank God, none of them were demolished in my presence, because I think that would certainly be the worst thing I'd ever seen. But yeah, as I said, according to Netanyahu's new restrictions, one thing is that if you're accused of being a terrorist, you um, even if you're not convicted in a court, your family home, like they can demolish it. So just something that we're doing is like when a family's home is set to be demolished, we try to create like a press presence and an international awareness that it's happening, in hopes that maybe the U.S. government or some government will call on Israel not to do it, because actually this is illegal as a form of collective punishment. And so, yeah, it's really horrible. Because these are people who have, in all the cases that I went to, these are people who have like just lost their children, in some cases to extrajudicial execution by the Israeli army, and in other cases to like multiple lifelong prison sentences. Again, like,
The and the Palestinians living in a house. It's not like Americans living in suburbia with three people. It's
no.
a
So
lot
this is,
more.
so if you're a terrorist, it's most likely, these are all young people. So young people don't move out of their parents' homes when, like, before they get married, and sometimes even after. So chances are, like, you're living with your parents, your mother and father, then all your siblings. Probably one of your parents is also their mother and father, so your grandparents, and multiple sets of like aunts and uncles. So like, let's say on average, like one of these homes, it has the immediate family of the alleged perpetrator, but also maybe like 30 or 40 other family members whose home is going to be demolished after they've just suffered the loss of their son, their daughter, their niece, whatever, like so it's horrible, and it's really, really illegal. Like, it's totally illegal in an international way. And then since there was a freeze on those houses that we went to, but now since then it's been lifted, and there were 5 demolitions in the last like 3 or 4 days, I think, all of alleged terrorists that didn't ever have a trial.
Thank you for talking to us. I can see this whole experience has really exhausted you. And let's talk again when you're back in the United States.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I can't really decide which of these things is the worst thing I've ever seen, but like certainly it's since I've been here, because I live, you know, like a really nice, lucky life as like American who's white and all this, like I could never have imagined like anything I've seen before I came. So thanks for talking to me, and yeah, I look forward to talking again whenever.